All right, everybody. Well, it is 6:01, so we will go ahead and get started with our third clinic of the First Timers program. So if you haven't watched or you weren't able to attend any of the first two, so Try 101 and the swim clinic, my name is Gillian. I am one of the coaches for the First Timers program. I'm with a youth organization called Live Grit, but I've been coaching the First Timers program since it started 8 years ago. So, in partnership with the Chicago Triathlon, we do this clinic series to make sure that everybody has all the information, can feel comfortable, confident for race day. So, it's hard to believe we're already at clinic number 3. Um, and officially are 12 weeks out from the triathlon. So let's kick it off. And if this is your first time at one of the clinics, this is the whole goal here is to answer your questions and for this to be guided by what are the things that the athletes want to know about. So feel free to pop any questions into the chat or shout them out if you want, whatever it is. And I will try to answer them as we go along. And I will also put into the chat my email address in case you have any questions specific to you and your training. Feel free to email me, and I will get back to you, and we can talk through whatever any questions you have. So let's kick it off here with the bike. Let's see. So the basics. Like to start it off every clinic with just a reminder that the order of the sports are swim, bike, run. And in case you didn't look very closely when you signed up and just picked an option, here are the race distances. So if we're looking specifically at the bike, you're doing Saturday's super sprint. The super sprint is 6.2 miles. If you're doing Sunday, this one of the Sunday races, so we have the sprint at 15 miles and then the international or the Olympic distance at 24.8 miles. And if you happen to have any kids, I got a couple emails of if any kids that you know are doing it, you can see their distances as well down there. So for the super sprint, here's the race map. The bike portion is the red portion of this map, and you're going to do 3 loops of the course, and that will get you to your distance. And it's a closed off route on the inner, whatever, I don't actually know the name of that drive, but that goes between Montrose and Foster. It's blocked off with cones. So it's basically 3 loops. Big thing about the super sprint is remembering what lap you're on. So you don't want to do too many and you don't want to get penalized for not doing enough. So the other thing about the super sprint is because it's on a roadway, there are obviously 2 180-degree turns. And we'll see if you're doing the international specifically, there are also some pretty, fairly sharp, I'm not going to say they're really sharp, but fairly sharp 180-degree turns. So it's a good idea during your training to do a little bit of bike handling and kind of practice going around in a 180-degree kind of circle, half circle, I guess. So that is, and just a reminder, this orange square up here is the transition area. So that's where you're going to come back to after every sport. So we'll talk about that at the a little bit later here. So here is the map again. So this is on, if you go to chicagotriathlon.com, you can see the map. You can zoom in on them. So over here on the left side is what we're going to focus on. So this is the bike course for the sprint and the international. So the sprint, as we've talked about before, you're going to get on at Randolph. So if you look over to the right, you see the orange transition area. and then Randolph is just you'll see where the arrows come out, and you're going to go north there. One thing to note on this is that to get up onto Lakeshore Drive, there is a little bit of a hill. So you're pretty much going to mount your bike and then kind of hit that ramp going up to Lakeshore Drive. So I say that to make sure when you rack your bike, to not have it in the hardest gear. You don't want to jump on your bike, hit a hill, and it just be and you're kind of cranking away. So having it in kind of a easier gear, so you can get your legs spinning and then get up that hill. So you're going to go up on the Randolph Bridge, and then go north on Lakeshore Drive all the way up to Hollywood. And then there you will also do a 180-degree turn and come back south on Hollywood. So both the sprint and the international are going to do that part of the course. As I've talked about in some of the previous clinics, you are going to, when you're riding, on the way up, it's going to be the southbound lanes of Lakeshore Drive are totally closed. So the one thing to remember, and this will make sense when you're riding, and then you'll also see, I'm going to show a video in a few minutes, you're going to ride on the left and pass on the right. So it's different. It will make sense when you're riding it why you are doing that. So for this first half of for the sprint distance and for the first half of the international, you're riding left, passing right. The international, when they drop out, so sprint will come in and then go back to transition. The international will then do this portion that is in this kind of this black square down here. That's the rest of the international distance. As you can see, it's a little bit more technical. You can see more turns, nothing crazy, but just being mindful that as you come to any kind of turn that will be very well marked and lots of volunteers, that you slow down and just are more mindful about people around you. On the bike, safety is always first over anything else. So slowing down around those cones, just making sure to look around so nobody's coming, whizzing in next to you. But that's the international. The international, as you can see, this kind of longer piece is this busway, and that is just super straight, fast, and so it's a lot of fun. Another thing about the international distance, because part of it is actually lower whacker, it does get a little dark. And so if you're wearing sunglasses, you may either want to take them off for that portion, put them in your back pocket, whatever it is. Or some people, depending on what the day is going to look, having a pair of sunglasses that aren't super dark, because it is lower whacker, and gets a little dark under there. So that is the course. Again, if it's your first clinic, this big orange area right here, that is just north of the swim start is your transition area. Yeah, so that's the course. If you have any questions about the course, pop them in. There is not any water or anything on the course. We're going to talk about hydration and fueling in a few minutes, but just knowing there's no water on the course, so you're going to need your own water bottle. Yeah, but it will be marked with mileage signs, so you can see, and you can kind of see the numbers here. Another thing about Lakeshore Drive is it does have, it has a little bit of incline, nothing crazy, obviously, but just, and then you also get the wind, which can very much seem like you're riding on an incline or up a hill. So like everything, the more you can get out and ride in like the open, air, the better, to kind of, experience a windy day, or, some parts of the lakefront path have a few hills, especially if you go down like by 31st Street. So good to practice those things. All right, let's keep moving. Okay, here's the video.
Transamerica Chicago Triathlon, the bike course. Chicago offers perhaps the most beautiful and unique triathlon cycling experience in the world. Both sprint and international distance cyclists enjoy an unparalleled tour of Chicago, and it all starts on famed Lakeshore Drive.
As an athlete, it's like you've teleported into another world, and it's this world where everything is great because it's so beautiful out there.
Athletes use the interior 2 lanes of Lakeshore Drive for approximately 7.5 miles until they reach the turnaround at Hollywood Boulevard. It's important to remember the ride left, pass right rule. That is, if you're not too distracted by the beauty.
On your left, you will have the greatest skyline known to man, at least in my opinion. And then on your right, you'll have this big body of water that looks so clear that you never even thought was possible in an urban city. And so talk about enjoying a bike ride. And then to go on Lower Wacker, you know, where Batman was filmed, it's just like you're just transported again, right?
While the sprint distance participants complete their 15 miles exiting to transition at Randolph, the international distance participants exit at Wacker Drive, where the most unique experience in urban triathlon begins. A ride underneath the city, along newly rebuilt and completely traffic-free Lower Wacker, aka the Bat Cave.
It's a tunnel, and it's unique because there's no wind. So when you get up to speed, you just fly down this thing. And that's truly unique. There aren't a lot of underground triathlons, essentially. You even have certain sections where you're riding quasi-underground and spectators are up over the top, over bridges looking down on you. Truly unique.
That's the McCormick Place Busway, Chicago's most secretive and unobstructed expressway. The open-air busway offers spectators a great vantage point as triathletes ride through the heart of Grant Park 15 feet below ground level. From there, athletes head past McCormick Place, then head back north on the busway to Middle Randolph and back to Transition 2, completing a true 40K course. And note, race officials patrol the bike course start to finish, along with bike marshals to aid stranded cyclists, ensuring a fair, safe, exciting, and unforgettable triathlon cycling experience.
All right, so a couple of things that I should have said beforehand. This video was made a number of years back, but I still think it's the best video out there that shows the course. What you might have noticed is that in the video, the athletes were sharing Lakeshore Drive with cars. That is not how they do it anymore. Now they totally shut down the southbound lanes of Lakeshore Drive. So there will not be any cars on Lakeshore Drive when you are riding. So that was a big, really positive change for the bike course. The other thing that you might have, I want to mention at this point, is for spectating. So as we talked about in the swim course, Chicago Triathlon is really great for spectating the swim. Like many triathlons, the bike is much more difficult. So if you have any spectators, if you're doing the sprint, I wouldn't even, that's a great time to go get your coffee and then come back for the run. If you are doing the international, as you saw, there are a few bridges that go over the busway that you can see the athletes from. But again, it's very difficult. You have to kind of there will be a timing app, so they will be able to kind of see where you are. But, I wouldn't say the bike's the best spectating portion of the triathlon, just given how long you go. And so that's the course. That gives you a good idea of what it looks like. And let's keep moving. So next thing, one of the biggest questions I get every year are concerns about rules and penalties. So in triathlons, there are officials, and they will give you a penalty for certain things. What I want to be very clear is it is not very common. And if it happens, no big deal. But for the bike, the reason why most penalties happen are for what's called drafting. So in some triathlons, you can ride like right on the wheel of the person in front of you. and it's called drafting, and it makes it easier for the second person in line, because the first person has, takes all of the wind, and so you get, but in Chicago Triathlon, you cannot draft. So if, like, for example, you watch the Olympics, you will 100% see them drafting. You cannot draft in this triathlon. So what does that mean? It means you always need to ride 5 bike lengths behind the person in front of you. Now that's that's a guesstimate. Basically what I say is, the whole idea is that if the person in front of you slams on their brakes, that you have enough time to slow down so you don't run into the back of them. So that's how far you should be behind the person in front of you. You can kind of, guesstimate what 5 bike lengths. The other thing is that if you are passing somebody, you have 20 seconds to do that. So what they don't want is for 2 people or 3 people, or 4 people, whatever, to be riding next to each other. As much as possible, they want it to be a single file. Somebody comes out to pass, they have 20 seconds to pass, and then move back over in front of the person that they are passing. Part of that is if you're riding and you see somebody and they break your wheel line, you shouldn't speed up. You should let that person pass you. So it's not like you have to come to a stop, but just maintain your pace, let that person pass you. And then if later down the road you feel like you have a burst of energy, you can pass them again. But you have 20 seconds to do so. And again, you're going to go out to the side. And if you're coming out to pass, always take a little look behind you so there's not somebody flying by. And then you have 20 seconds to pass. You get back in line, and off you go. So if for whatever reason you do get too close, or it takes too long to pass, or whatever, it's not like they have stop watches like sitting there. What would happen for drafting is you get a blue card penalty. For the international distance, this means that 2 minutes gets added to your time. For the sprint distance, 1 minute gets added to your time. If you get a yellow card penalty, so that might be something like littering, for example. Whatever you take onto the bike course, you are to take off the bike course. So if you litter or something like that, or another one, well, I mean, that's the biggest one I can think of at this point. I mean, I think on the run, it might be like headphones and things like that. But you'll get a yellow card. And so what basically will be happening on the bike is there'll be the officials will be on mopeds. And they will be patrolling the course. Again, sounds so much more, I guess, official than it is. And if they come up next to you and they hold up a card, if it's blue, you just keep going and they add it to your time. If it's yellow, once you get off the bike, there is a tent right when you get on the run. You just have to go in, tell them your number, and then depending on what the penalty they assessed for is, they will tell you how long to stay, and then they'll tell you to go. So that's all the penalties. I get these questions though all the time of people worrying about it. Don't worry about it as long as you're thinking safety and and not riding next to people. You are going to be totally fine. Yeah, so that is that. We'll move on from that subject. So the next thing to talk about are transitions and the bike. So another picture of the transition area. So, as we've talked about, you are going to be in a wave. Your wave is going to correspond to a rack that is going to have a sign like this. That is where you are going to put your bike and all of your stuff. If you can put your bike only if you're doing Sunday's races, not Saturday's super sprint. For Sunday's race, if you want to drop your bike off, so if you go down to the expo, which you have to do to get your stuff on Friday, but more so on Saturday, you get your packet, you get your numbers, you can put your numbers on your bike, so you can see on the top tubes here, everybody has a number. you can leave your bike the night before on the rack. That is the only thing you can leave. You can't leave your helmet, you can't leave a pump, you can't leave a bag or anything, just your bike. So why would you want to do this? Well, if you are, taking a mode of transportation like a Uber or Lyft or something, and you don't want to take it with you, or just don't want to, it's one less thing to carry the morning of, you can put it in there. If you don't do that on the night before, then on Sunday morning, you just bring your bike with you when you come to get ready for the race. As we've talked about, there's going to be an early transition opening for the international distance. I think it's like 4 o'clock, and then later in the morning, so it reopens at like 6 o'clock for the sprint distance. Those sprint can go really early if you want. So you're going to bring your bike and such and stuff in that morning. You're going to find your rack. You are going to rack your bike, and then you're going to set up your stuff around your bike. Now, not the next clinic, but the July 17th clinic is all about transition. So we will talk about how you set your stuff up, what things you want to remember, but just giving you a picture of this is what transition looks like. So once you're done racking your bike, setting your bike up, you are going to go to the swim. You do your swim, you come out of the swim, and then you're going to come into transition and find your rack to get your bike. So if you're wearing a wetsuit, you take your wetsuit off, you take your goggles off, you leave them in the same spot where your bike is. You take your bike off you put your shoes on. You put your helmet on. That's what I wanted to say. Whenever you are touching your bike, whether that's walking it into transition the morning of, or going to go out on the course here, you have to have your helmet on and strapped. So you can't wait till you get to the mountain line, which we'll talk about in a minute, to put your helmet on. It should be the first thing you do pretty much when you get into transition from the swim. So you're gonna grab your bike, and then you are going to, there's gonna be these big blow up arches that say bike out and bike in. So you'll see it, and they will be up in the top west corner of transition. So the morning of, you'll take a look and see where that is. You know where to go, and you know what route you need to take to get there. So you're going to walk your bike. So at this point, you are not on your bike. You are walking your bike, like this top left picture. Now, this athlete is doing the shoes on the bike and then mounts the bike and slides their feet in and takes off. If you want to do that, I would, look at a YouTube video and you can definitely try that. I put my shoes on when I'm in my transition. I walk up, it's mainly grass. It's fine. So you'll see. And so then you're going to go under the arches, like this bottom corner. See, they're still walking their bikes. Their helmets are clipped. And where they are headed is this line on the ground called the mount line. And you have to get past that line. And there'll be so many volunteers telling you to walk your bike until you get past the mount line. After you get past the mount line, then you can get on your bike and go up that ramp like we talked about. That's the same thing about coming in. So when you come back in, there's going to be the dismount line. Same thing. You have to get off your bike before you cross the dismount line. So you would get off the bike and then you would walk it, run it, jog it, whatever you want to do back to your transition area. And so that's kind of how transition works. And you take your helmet off, take your shoes off if you're switching shoes, and then head out on the run. So I'm going to check a couple of questions. We're going to answer some of these in a few seconds. Okay. So the question is, how much space is there between bikes on the rack? So the way that we're going to rack our bikes, so, ideally, there's enough room. The way you're going to rack your bikes, let's see if I can go back, is you are going to alternate which direction your bike faces. So if your neighbor's front wheel is down on one side, you're going to put your bike with the front wheel down on the other side. So then when you set up your stuff, it's going to be behind, underneath your bike. So that's how you have enough space for your stuff. So if, like in this first bike, this person's stuff would be underneath their wheel or right next to their bike, depending on how much room there is. I would say, if you kind of look, some years, we try to advocate for as much space as possible. So I would say, there should be enough space. And if not, that's why we'll be down there morning up to make sure we get some more space on the rack. So that isn't something you have to worry about. But that's how you get stuff in, is the bikes are alternating and you're putting your stuff underneath your bike. So another question is about bike locks, and great question. So bike locks, you do not, you can't bring a bike lock. If you're going to lock your bike at night, or bring your bike in the night before, you can't lock it to anything. They do have security. I have never personally heard of anything ever happening to a bike. The way they know it's your bike is you're going to have a wristband that's going to match a bunch of numbers on your bike, and only athletes can get into the area. Same thing with morning up. You can't lock your bike. In my time, there's no reason to need to. There's a ton of security that nobody but athletes, this is a closed, fenced off area, are able to get in there. So then another question about, kind of getting started on the bike. So, one thing, again, just remembering to have it into that lighter gear to get going. But also once you get up onto the ramp, and it's a ramp, so it's not a super big hill. I just like to say that so you don't have your bike in the heaviest gear that there is. But once you get up on Lakeshore Drive, there's more than enough space to take your time. People are going to pass you. Let them pass you, and just kind of take your time getting into the ride. All right. Let's see. Okay, let's see what else all right, so there's one question that I promise I will answer right now. So let's talk about gear. And so if there's any other questions about the course and such, pop them in there. But gear, what do you need for the bike? So you need a bike and you need a helmet. If you don't have a bike and you don't want to get one, Super Sprint does, I think they are doing it again, but historically have done the divvy wave. So you could do the divvy wave through the Super Sprint. But as far as the bike goes, there are very few requirements to what kind of bike. It can be anything. All it needs are 2 wheels and 2 brakes. So what does that mean? The bikes you can't have are like a fixed gear bike. So that would be a bike where single speed is totally fine as long as it is free wheel. So if you stop spinning your legs, that the bike keeps moving, versus the fixed gear, which if you're of my age, when we were growing up, are the bikes when the way you would stop them is by pushing back. You can't have that, and it does need to have 2 brakes, so it can't just have 1 brake. But it can be anything. So down in the right-hand corner, we have your kind of more traditional kind of hybrid bike. We have, obviously, this picture has a lot of like different road bikes with the drop-down handlebars. It can be the flat handlebars. I did put, so on the left middle here is what's called a triathlon bike or a TT bike. You do not, that is not a requirement. And frankly, as I've said before, unless unless you really want to, and biking is your total thing, it's not even, I've done many triathlons and do not own a triathlon bike. They are made to go straight and fast. There is some stuff about their geometry that's, helps you when you go onto the run, but nothing that, unless there's a reason that you want to get one, you absolutely do not need a triathlon bike. 2 wheels, 2 brakes, 2 pedals, and that is it, as far as bikes. Yeah. So if you do have like racks and baskets and such, I would recommend taking them off, mainly because of transition and just the like hitting, the heaviness, not the heaviness, the like space and getting it stuck on something that there's a lot of people. So that is one recommendation. Helmets. You have to have a helmet. The helmet can be any bike helmet, or what it can't be is a skateboarding helmet. So if you look inside your helmet, it should be certified, which I think inside there'll be a sticker that says CPSC. And as long as it's certified, you're good to go. Now, just as like a tip, helmets don't maintain their level of safety forever. So after 3 to 5 years, the foam that a helmet that keeps your head safe starts to get air bubbles and starts to break down. So if you've got like a 15-year-old helmet, just think about maybe it's worth replacing it. And there's all kinds of helmets out there, but any helmet will do as long as it's certified and not like a skateboard helmet. Okay, so I hope that answered the bike questions. Let's see. All right. So that's bike and helmet. The next thing as far as kind of gear is service and fitting. So you do want to bikes do need to be tuned up. And the reason why is one, you don't want to have mechanical problems, or you want to minimize the risk of a mechanical problem race day, or even training. Two, by having it, like many things, serviced occasionally, it will make the parts last longer, to making sure your chain is lubed, all of that stuff, making sure you're riding on the right PSI of your tires. And if you're like, what is the PSI I should be riding on the side of your tires, it will say, if you take a flashlight, it will say PSI, and it will give a range, and that's what the range your tires should be riding on. Pushing them by hand is going to be is not a super accurate way to test it. And every bike, if you're riding a hybrid, that's very different than a road bike. So if you have a pump, or stop by a bike shop and use their pump, there'll be a PSI gauge, and you can use that to check your tires. Now, tires do lose air starting within the first 24 hours. So you do need to pump your tires up pretty regularly. So it might be worth, given that you've committed to the triathlon, investing in a pump for home. So we recommend at least every year that you get your bike serviced. And what a good idea actually might be, somewhere around now. So as we come closer to race day, shops will start to get very busy. So you don't want to wait till the week before. So it might be a good idea to get if you haven't had one in a while, your tune up now. And then what you can do is go back right before race day, schedule an appointment to have just your race day check. So that's where they will just check all your brakes, your shifting, fill your tires, things like that, but won't need to do a full tune-up. So if you haven't had one, in the last year or so, even if your brake's been sitting around, the great thing, a good shop will take a look at it and tell you what you need. Versus, hopefully having to do something you don't need. So, and then fitting. So what am I talking about when I'm talking about bike fitting? Riding a bike should not be uncomfortable. I'm sure there's like a break-in period of sitting, maybe it's you haven't ridden a bike in a long time and your shoulders, always thinking about keeping your shoulders down and relaxed. But if you're riding and say your knee starts to hurt or your feet are cramping or something like that, or it's just unbearable, that you are like, I hate this, I never want to ride a bike again. Oftentimes the issue is the fit of the bike. So that would be like the saddle height, or the reach, so how far away your handlebars are, or even as basic as the size of the frame. And so if that's the case, again, I would recommend stopping into a bike shop. Hopefully you can find one that you like and trust and good people, and asking them, to take a look at your bike fit. You really get into triathlons or you're riding a lot and you're like, I'm really into this. There is like a full fitting where not only are they getting you right, as far as seat height and stuff, but they're also looking like how can they maximize power and things like that. So many shops have a bike fitter on staff. So but oftentimes it can be an easy little tweak, like raising your seat a little bit or something like that. The next thing as far as gear is a flat kit. Now, I know some people might be like, okay, I have no idea how to change a flat tire. Totally fine. Biggest thing is to have the stuff you would need on your bike if you did get a flat tire. So that would be a tube, the things that are absolutely a tube, tire levers, which are these green things up here. So that's what would get the tire off the rim. It is fairly impossible to get it off with your fingers. This thing right here that says Air Kiss is a CO2 cartridge. So that's what would fill your tube up if you don't have a pump or a mini pump on you. So those are the three most important things. The other things that are just in the picture and are like tire patches, and then a multi-tool. All great to have, but the tire or the tube, the tire levers, and then some kind of air thing is always great, even in training. Because even if you don't know how to fix it, I promise, if you're riding on the lakefront path or something, somebody riding by will, and if you have the stuff, they can fix it for you. For race day, as you might have heard in the video, there will be mechanics. Historically, many of them have been from, I've talked about it before, BFF bikes, but there'll be a bunch of, there'll be a number, I don't want to use the word bunch, a handful of bike mechanics on the course helping with any issues. But again, they start with a handful of, as much as they can carry, tubes and things like that. But throughout the day, that dwindles down. So having your own stuff will either let them stop, or even times, I hear that another athlete has stopped and helped fix their tires. If you want to learn how to fix a tire, YouTube is great and practice, or again, look around at the shops. A lot of them do flat tire fixes. That's also a lot of times in the winter time. So maybe it's a winter project to learn that. The other thing, in transition, the morning of, there will be like an emergency bike technician tent up by the bike in out, usually. So if you have you get into transition, you're like, my tire's flat, or something like that, or my handlebar fell off or whatever, you can go see them up there. All right. So kit is very much, I recommend. Knowledge it's great, but you got a lot going on. Last thing for gear, clothing and pedals. So shoes and pedals, I guess. As we've talked about in the other clinics, the kind of go-to thing is triathlon clothing, something you can swim, bike, and run in. So here's a whole bunch of different variations of triathlon clothing. I've also said triathlon shorts would be yes, do that. If you're just going to pick something and then put a shirt on over that. Bike shorts are great for like long rides and such, but you do not want to swim in bike shorts if you can avoid it. So you need something to wear. As far as shoes and pedals, there's a couple options. if you're riding on flat pedals and that's so this platform pedal and that's what you feel comfortable with, go for it. There's no, unless it's something that you want to invest the time into and learning how to clip in and clip out. Flat pedals are great. You'd wear your tennis shoes and off you go. If you are at the place where you want to learn more about clipless pedals, so that is where you have a shoe, something like this, that has a cleat. I'm missing a screw. So if you've done Soul Cycle or something like that, or any kind of cycling class, you probably wore something like this. You actually clip into your pedal, and then you are clipped into the pedal the whole 360-degree, way around. 100% there are benefits to this. That is just a reality. You're going to get more power instead of just pushing down. Like with a flat pedal, you have power all the way around. But what I would say is, if it's not a priority, it is absolutely fine. And you will not be the only person on a platform pedal. Actually, that's probably the majority of people. But just knowing that it is something out there, and if you've done it at a spin class or something, you're like, oh, that's interesting. It has a little bit of a learning curve out in the real world. But again, something you can certainly, learn if you want. So do you choose tennis shoes or bike shoes for the bike? Socks are a personal preference. I wear socks. I like socks. Some people, especially there's like triathlon shoes that don't wear socks. But again, total preference. All right. That is the gear. Any questions on gear? Pop them in the chat. Let's see if I missed anything. All right. I think on time this time. So training and nutrition. Not going to go super deep into this, but as far as training, there's a couple different ways to train for the bike. Indoor trainers, things like cycle classes. So if you're doing a cycle class, I would say that, it is definitely helpful for the outdoor bike, but a lot of that is probably more like endurance. You're building your endurance. Indoor trainers would be like where you put your bike on a trainer and you ride inside, and a lot of the new ones can control the resistance and stuff. That's a little bit like the next step towards actually riding outside. A lot of people do this in the winter time, or if it's just, more convenient than getting to a bike path during the week or whatever. But for the training, long rides for sure. You want to be going on some long rides, which let's see if I pull up the program. Okay, so this is like week 3, 4, 5 of our very basic training program that is on the first timers page, and I will pop that into the chat here in a second, but you can also get to it from the Facebook. So for example, from our very basic training plan, we have like a 40-minute bike ride, 45-minute bike ride. So that's what we're considering kind of a long ride. Okay. As far as intervals, at this point, again, if you're doing a spin class or something like that, great, do the intervals. If you're out riding on the path, as much as if you're doing a more like, I guess, in-depth training plan, they may have some intervals put in there. If you're out riding on the path, the things I would say is, do little bursts of a minute hard, or like if you hit a hill, really pushing it up the hill or something like that. But most of our bikes are more focused around getting the endurance of the distance. I don't know what I keep doing to this thing here. Let's go through it one more time. The other thing that we talked about last time at the last clinic are brick workouts. So brick workouts, I'm sorry, this is gonna make me sick watching it again. Brick workouts are where you do a long ride and then you do a short run. And the idea here is that you are practicing going from the bike to the run. And so the reason you do that is because when you're riding and then you go to a run, you have a shift in the muscles that you're using. And the name came from, or one of the theories is the name of brick workouts. Yes, they're stacked on top of each other, bike run, but also your legs feel a little bit like bricks. So practicing that transition so that on race day, it's not the first time you've gone from the bike to the run. So that's kind of the bike training. As far as nutrition, this is really important. The number one mistake I see happen with first timers is not drinking enough fluid on the bike. That is where you will get dehydrated. It is the longest. It's often right in the sun. So you need to be drinking fluids while you're on the bike. And if biking is not something that you do a lot, it's actually, it's easier said than done. To put so you'll need a bicycle, a water bottle cage, unless you're going to wear like a camelback, which is also fine. And practicing taking the water bottle out of the cage, taking a drink, and putting it back while riding. If you haven't done that, make sure you practice it, because I have heard before people did go and had never practiced it and they were like, I just didn't drink any water. That's going to make for a really tough run, because you'll already be dehydrated by then. When we talk about solids, I'm more talking about energy. So it's not enough to just drink water throughout the triathlon. Whether you're doing the super sprint, the sprint, or the international, you need some kinds of electrolytes and also some kind of energy. So if you go to a sporting store, sometimes that's in this, these little packets that are called goos. There's like Gatorade Endurance, which is you put it into your water, but making sure you have something that is giving you calories, because that's going to be your energy and your fuel. And the biggest thing is to not let yourself get totally depleted when you decide to start doing that. So that's where the bike is so important, to make sure you have some kind of calorie coming in while you're on the bike. Like I said, I think Gatorade historically has been what the Chicago Triathlon uses. They're not going to have that on the bike, but if you want to stay consistent with the run, looking into like Gatorade Endurance and things like that. But again, any sporting store, running store, anything like that, Dick's Sporting Goods, will have a bunch of different nutrition, and making sure you try it before the race day. So train with it. We always say train what you're going to race. Nothing new on race day. And that's where the practice. When you're going out for a long ride, practice trying, some electrolytes, and just make sure it works for you. Yeah. So riding around the Chicago. So if you're not super familiar with the bike routes and things, we would set the lakefront path, which is great. I would always say earlier you go and more off times, the better. I also really like to go south on the lakefront path. One, you get a couple of hills. It's really pretty, and oftentimes not as quite congested as like the North Avenue area of the bike path. City routes, if you're a commuter or something, there are, obviously Chicago is trying to become more bike friendly and such. So there's things like Elston and such that you can ride. Group rides is a great way, if you're not familiar, to go with people that are familiar with bike routes. So looking at your local bike shops again and seeing who has group rides. The Botanical Gardens up north, a great place. Indiana. So that's one, if you want to take a big trek down on the South Shore into Indiana, has a really nice path. Suburbs, there's like the Prairie Path, things like, that's great. There's so some of the ways, it's you might have to do some research, and I think this is a great place for and maybe I'll start a conversation there on the Facebook page about where people like to ride. But yeah, there are some options around Chicago. So I think with that, let's see. The question is about is it common for beginners to wear running shoes with flat pedals? 100%. I would, versus the clipless pedals. Don't worry about it. Like I said, there is a benefit to it, but you will be totally fine. And so many people wear the flat pedals or the tennis shoes and the flat pedals because, like I said, there is a learning curve. So who knows? Maybe you get into the summer and you're like, I'm really liking this biking thing. I think I'm going to get into it. I want to bike on the off, not triathlon season. Then it's a great next step. But don't worry about it if that's not high on your priority list right now. And yes, and then I think I've mentioned it before. BFF Bikes, it is great place for beginner rides. They have all kinds of rides. I think I actually saw that they are doing a triathlon information session, so probably similar to like the 101, but in person, so you actually get to meet people, which is fun. So I would definitely check BFF Bikes out. And question about sunscreen. Great question. Sunscreen. I take the time to put it on after the swim, before the bike, and then after the bike, before the run. I think it's it's one of those things. Take the 30 seconds, the minute, whatever it is, to put it on. You can put it on before the swim, but especially if you're wearing a wetsuit, the wetsuit, kind of wiping it off. So I would recommend, putting it on, during the transition time, and whatever kind, whether that's the spray or just, typical lotion, that's great. This is not one of there are some triathlons like the Ironman, half Ironman, that they also have wetsuit strippers. They also have sunscreeners. I'm sure there's a different name for it, but people that put sunscreen on. So definitely sunscreen. And then question about going back to passing. So for the first half of the bike, so the sprint portion, or the first half of the international, so Lakeshore Drive, it is ride left, pass on the right. If you are doing the international, when you go down into Lower Wacker, you will then go back to the more traditional ride right, pass on left. I promise, again, it will be so clear as to why you're doing this when you get there. But yes, ride left, pass right for Lakeshore Drive. Yes. So, okay. I'm trying to think what I'm forgetting here, but any last minute questions, bike or otherwise, pop them in the chat. Don't forget to check out the open water swims. Go to Chicago Triathlon, and then under programs, there's like open water swims. Those are like big group open water swims. First one, weather was a little iffy, so yeah, so way to go for anybody that went out there. I heard it went off and it was great, but let's see. Question on the average times. What's the average time for a bike? And again, I don't know that I can't give you the average. There is a very wide range. I think in triathlons, I know people hate that I answer these questions this way, but in triathlons, everybody has their strength. Everybody has the thing they're working on. So there is such a range. If you really want to see, you can, I think, if you go into the Chicago Triathlon website, there's the results, and you can kind of look at the last couple of years just to get an idea of what people ride at, but you're going to get such a range. And like we I talked about in the swim, I mean, the triathlon's goal is for everyone to finish. So I would not worry at all about not finishing the bike. If you got out of the water, take that adrenaline and go do what you're gonna do the best you can. But their goal is to get everybody to finish. I mean, there are people that have major mechanical issues and still finish, the bike. So I would not worry about that. Just kind of get out and ride. And I know that is not the question people want, but or the answer. But it's such a range, so it's hard to say. All right, let's see. Okay, so next clinic, 3 weeks, the run. I will say that one's pretty basic, and then we go into the last two, which I think are the most fun, transitions and then race day. So make sure you join the Facebook page, check out the website for this video, and feel free to email me with any questions. And let's see. Okay, hold. I'm gonna post if I can do this. I am going to put in the chat real quick the link for the first timers page. So there's the link. Figure this out. There's the link for the first timers page. So feel free to poke around there, and then we will see everybody in 3 weeks for the run, and hopefully see some people out at the beach or on the lakefront path riding. So have a good one, everyone, and see you soon.